Welcome to Experiencing Consciousness. My name is Dyba.
And I'm Dr. Kathryn Rossi. We're happy you're here.
And we're on. Okay. Okay, so are we okay?
Absolutely. We're better than the best.
Okay, cool. So I think we're live online and everything is set and good to go. So
all right.
What are we going to be talking about today? There's plenty of things that we can talk, and one that actually unites a lot of them together, right?
Absolutely. We're going to talk about the numinosum.
Exactly. Well, I'll just what that is. I mean, there's so many different definitions. Numinosum.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, that which is mysterious, tremendous, fascinating, curious. This is what the numinosum is.
So that would be something new, something novel.
Absolutely. So when you think about what motivates you in life, it's the things that are interesting, the things that are new, the things that you're discovering. And so the term numinosum came from the Greek, and it was defined originally by a theologian, Rudolf Otto. And he wanted to, what's the seed that's underneath everything? What motivates people in any spiritual path? Be it an organized religion or otherwise. And so he did a lot of interviewing, and he found out that which was mysterious, tremendous, and fascinating is what people motivated themselves to go further in. And so what I believe when someone comes in for psychotherapy, that they've actually forgotten a little bit about their numinosum. Needs to be rekindled. What do you think, Jan?
Well, forgot, but maybe they also would like to experience one, because that's one of the motivations for doing therapy, to do something in a different way, novel way. And I'm also I mean, before we go further into the therapeutic applications, when you were talking about this numinosum, I was also thinking about, since I am a fan of horrors, horror movies, horror tales, horror literature and stuff, and there's a lot of mysterious things down there that we don't know a lot about. And the best, what's the best horror movie or horror tale? It's where the evil thing or something that you are actually being scared by is undefined. So it's actually most of the times tremendous, mysterious, a bit new, I would say. So is it possible that the numinosum can be also in those terms? I mean, so that it not only be fascinating, but also you may be, you may be fascinated by it, but also in such a way that it kind of scares you a bit?
Fascination has many facets, right? When you think of how a diamond is cut, a princess cut diamond has 57 facets. And that's why they sparkle so much, and why, those of us that love diamonds really love them. And so how the fascination shows itself is what's important. Does that fascination frighten you? That's okay. It's your experience with it. does it move you further? That's kind of the question. And
Mhm.
so I'm totally open to every experience that people have. And sometimes, in the psychological sense of things, sometimes people do gravitate towards danger. They gravitate towards fear because it's fascinating.
Yeah, it also launches a lot of things on the on the biological level, right? Like
Oh,
adrenaline
sure.
or noradrenaline and stuff like
You
that.
know, that you get that adrenaline shot to
Yeah,
pay attention.
exactly. So maybe that's also, and maybe that's also what's brought partially by numinosum also, so by the novelty of that you are excited and it gets you high on energy.
Well, sure. And then when I'm a big proponent of happiness. And happiness is something that happens in the present moment. It's not in the past, it's not in the future, it's right now. And so I think that depending on which tense you select, like in this case, the present tense, that the numinosum is different than if it's a future tense or a past tense. There's a lot of variability.
Mhm. Proponent of happiness, when you said that, me with my, I mean, I also like happiness, but on the other hand, I'll say, uh, basically I'm more kind of like a Gomez Adams type of a guy. So happiness, yes, in a weird, strange ways. It
Well,
works.
but you bring up a good point, and the original Addams Family was a TV program in the 1960s, and, Pugsley, remember Pugsley Addams?
Yeah, of course.
Well, his real life name was Ken Weatherwax. We're the same age, and I knew him, that
Hmm.
he was the next door neighbor of a friend of mine, and so I have a different relationship with the Addams Family than most. But I think it's so much fun.
Yeah, and it was probably based on cartoon made by Charles Adams, or was the movie the first? I don't.
Oh, no, it was a TV program, and, yes, it was, and in those days, they did a lot of that, and then to add fun to the discussion, when you think about numinosity, is that my longest friend, um, the series, The Beverly Hillbillies, was designed after her family, and the pilot was shot at their house. And
Hmm.
so, the fun and the fascination of, in the Beverly Hillbillies, for those people that don't know it, it was this guy that, struck oil and became all of a sudden really rich, and then was living the life of luxury in Beverly Hills. And my friend's family was selected because they lived in a really posh neighborhood, and they had chickens at the side of the yard, and in the front of the yard there was corn growing and this and that, and also she loved horses, and she had a Shetland pony.
Hmm.
And I'm a kid. She's a kid. We just think this is normal. We don't realize that this is, not normal, in posh neighborhoods and things like that. But the legend lives on, and I think it's that kind of spark, the novelty, the interest, the what can happen next, and in my thinking, the why not, that this is all part and parcel of what is the numinosum. It's like, what sparks your interest? What
Hmm.
do you want to explore further? And in whatever way that leads you. And so when I ask you today, Jan, where is your numinosum today?
I have no idea. We're gonna find out, I think.
Okay. Well, my
There's.
numinosum today is that, I live in California. I
Mhm.
live on the Central Coast. It's halfway between Los Angeles and San Francisco. And we've been suffering a drought, but the rain came. And what's
Mhm.
interesting about that is that the storms are coming in and the winds are coming from like thousands of miles away, pushing the waves. And yesterday, the waves were, I'll say it in meters, they were like 7.5 meters high. It was
Oh.
unbelievably cool. And these waves generally they break close to the shore, but some of these were breaking like half a mile out, so it's
Mhm.
like a kilometer or more out, and there's rows of these waves, and they were coming in, and the sound and the fury and really the danger, potentially in waves that are that huge. It has just captured my attention. So this morning I went out to my back deck, and which is wooden, and it was literally shaking
Mhm.
from the roar of the waves in the distance. I think nature at its best, I'm just high. It's just beautiful.
Mm. So that's something that brings that effect into place. And how does numinosum actually work within a psychotherapy, or is it part of psychotherapy, or is it something that leads you towards psychotherapy, or is it a goal of psychotherapy or a process within psychotherapy? I know that you were working with the numinosum effect together with Dr. Rossi, developing some concepts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the answer is it could be any of those things.
Hmm.
Generally, why people come in for therapy is they have a perplexing problem or issue that they're not able to resolve on their own. They're in pain, they're hurting,
Hmm.
and usually stuck, a little bit stuck. And so, in the way that Ernie and I would work, is that Ernie called it the fail-safe method, and
Hmm.
it's really marvelous. And that is that what on the one hand or on the one side of you is solid, good, dependable. Maybe it's what's numinous for you in the moment,
Hmm.
but in having a place that is the opposite of the problem, the opposite of the trauma.
Hmm.
And more often than not, we would key into um, the not using the word the numinosum, because it's, you have to explain it, it's intellectual, but what's the best that you're feeling in your body right now, what's I mean, in a way where it can anchor a safety for that person, and so there, by way of contrast, you can go deeper, most likely into the problem, into the pain,
Hmm.
because you have this other side. And often that's how we would begin with a therapy session. It would depend on the person,
Hmm.
but we were uh, concerned of how you set up a successful psychotherapy session
Hmm.
where everybody can be a winner, where the therapist can be a winner, where the client can be a winner, and where there's that safety. And so that's how we would start. And then within the therapy itself, you got to admit, I mean, you brought it up with the horror films, is that there's something that's really fascinating about the depths of pain that one is in. I mean,
Hmm.
it's like, who knew you could go that deep? Or, there's something about it that, is fascinating, and it holds your attention. And so, in this respect, in following the fascination within the therapy of which then gives the courage to go deeper and the curiosity of what's going to come next. So, what do you make of that?
Well, few questions come out on the road when you were talking. about few important things. The first one, you were saying about creating. On one side, you go deeper into those difficult moments to create something new and fascinating and discover some things. But also to do it, you need to have that. I would call it a safe place, or the place to start. And and the other thing that you said, you were thinking both with Dr. Rossi about how to create a successful session where everybody is a winner. And I think that those two things are combined. If they are not, just tell me. But my question is, okay, so what's the formula, or what are your observations, or things that you come to about those things, how to create that safe place, how to create a session that's going to be successful for all parts.
Mhm.
And that's maybe I would add to it more oil to the fire, how to create a transformational session that's going to be beneficial for someone in such a way that they're going to actually see it or
Mhm.
experience it as beneficial. Okay, that's it for me.
That's a big, order. Well, it's interesting when we think in terms of how do you create a formula for these things, and a formula, a protocol, like this sort of thing. It doesn't work like that. It's that work within a structure. And within this loose structure, there's the freedom to go wherever it is that you go. But when you consider that when you're personally successful at doing something, whether it's therapy or anything else, is that you want to feel grounded. You want to feel that safety. And
Mhm.
so that's why we create that within psychotherapy. So the structure is really the four-stage creative cycle.
Mhm.
And I know that we've talked about this, any number of times. I want to encourage the listeners is that, intellectually, I can say these things about the four-stage creative cycle. Experientially, it takes some time to be able to truly understand it and apply it. That Ernie and I were talking one time of, for our students, how long would it take them before they understood the four-stage creative cycle? And on average, it was 2 years. It takes
Mhm.
some time. So I want to be encouraging of the fact that just because you don't see it right away or experience it right away within yourself and within your clients doesn't mean that you won't. And it's the best structure that there is. And so within that, the stage one is what's the question? What's the curiosity? What's the problem? What's the issue? So if you add the numinosum into this mix, which
Mhm.
I think is really a great thing to do, is that you're bringing this spark of life into the process
Mhm.
for yourself as a therapist and for your client. And so whatever the issue, the concern, whether it's being spoken out loud or whether it's emerging within the client, that you as a therapist find that fascinating, that you look for the numinosum in yourself in relationship to your client. And when you do that, the level of an ability to pay attention to the small nuances grows.
Okay. What does it mean to find numinosum in yourself and in your client within a therapeutic session?
What fascinates you?
Okay.
So it becomes really simple. So, for instance, a person comes in and they're crying
Mhm.
and they can't seem to stop crying. You know, we've all experienced that from time to time, where they don't even have any words, they're just crying. Well, if you as a therapist actually find that fascinating, it's like, wow, you know, this person is really emoting. And I just want to see what comes next. So instead of having the attitude, how can I fix this? Which is what a lot of therapists want to do. How can I fix this? How can I comfort you? You know, what can I do? What can I say? Instead, just be present with it and be fascinated with it. And whatever that fascination is, you can speak that. The fascination might be as simple as, wow, you're really in pain, aren't you? So it's a different orientation. Would you not agree, Jan?
Well, no, depends. Since I'm working with you for years, it's not different so much to my orientation. So, but yes, generally, at least to some sort of psychotherapies, where I don't see a lot of excitement within uh, a therapist sometimes. Sometimes because the paradigm that they are in tells them not to actually show emotions, for example. So that's when you compare that to this one, to those kinds of approaches, yeah, there's a huge difference down there.
But
Mhm.
even in the it all depends how you say it. I have a
Mhm. Yeah.
tendency to be that I'm an emotional person, and so I have a tendency to express it that way. But it can be as simple as, you know, you really are in a lot of pain, aren't you? You know,
Mhm.
it's the tone, it's how you go about it, um, that it's a way of acknowledging that person,
Yeah, there's an
and
acceptance in it also.
an acceptance and an acknowledgement. And then there's also a bond that happens, the bond between therapist and client, where the client is saying, whoa, you know, you're really paying attention to me. That many therapists feel so comfortable with creating treatment plans and really sticking with that treatment plan. You know, in other words, having a protocol. And for anyone who works this way, good for you. You know, I mean, how wonderful if that is working great for you. No need to change anything like that. But for a lot of people, a lot of therapists want to be able to be a little bit more spontaneous in the moment and to be able to, you know, as the saying goes, bob and weave, you know, of moving with that client that's in front of them. And so when you bring your own personal fascination in it, then to me, that changes everything. It's always worth a try. And of course, in stage 2, where the person is getting, you know, really deeply into the confusion, the difficulty, the doubts, as we all do when we're trying to grow, that there can be the fascination of that, and even
Mhm.
encouraging an inner observer of the client of you know, while you're going through this intensity, is there a part of you that can simply impartially observe? And in some ways you're not saying it, you know, straightforwardly, but you're actually encouraging their numinosum to just simply watch. And when you can simply watch something, you got to admit it's fascinating, isn't it?
Plus, if is it also that watching something kind of promotes or facilitates dissociation, and by that
Mhm.
provides a safe spot to actually go more deeply into difficult uh, kind of realms of our own psychological living or functioning. while at the same time having that kind of, platform to eventually just move there and watch and,
Mhm.
kind of like that.
It becomes interactive. It
Hmm.
becomes interactive within the client, and facilitating that kind of interaction is beneficial everywhere you turn. It's beneficial for you, the therapist, because the client is doing the work. And you want the client to do the work.
Hmm.
If you do the work for the client doesn't benefit nearly as much as when the client does the work themselves. And then the
Hmm.
therapist can relax and observe and guide in a way that seems appropriate at the time, depending on a person's orientation. But it leaves the therapist free to be comfortable on the inside of themselves, which is a really interesting concept. That, at the end of a therapy session, if you, the therapist, are really exhausted, I would like to suggest you didn't do something right.
Yeah. Or
And
you are trying to do way more than you could for
right.
your client, right?
Yes. And so, while the motivation is good, if you're exhausted at the end of the session, that's your invitation to learn to do something a little different as a therapist. And what we're talking about today is a possibility of something that's a little bit different.
Hmm.
I care deeply for psychotherapists. I want everybody to have a great career. I want everybody to be able to go home at night to their loved ones. In my case, my cats, because I live alone. But,
Uh-huh.
to be able to have that, that freedom, that energy where you're not exhausted, where you're not fretting, where you're not second guessing, that you can pat yourself on the back to say, I did the best that I could today. And of course, I do believe in reviewing a session in one's mind of how you could be better. But
Hmm.
if you're exhausted at the end, then you're working harder in that stage too than your client is.
Yeah.
And
Plus,
so it's helpful.
yeah. Plus, there's a lot of research proving that most valuable are the insights, and it doesn't, and it's cross approach.
Mhm.
So it doesn't matter which approach that is. Most valuable are the insights, or the things that actually the client came up to themselves, uh, rather than being told by a therapist, right?
Absolutely. And then when you think about for yourself, when was the last time you enjoyed somebody telling you what to do? Oh, never?
Ne- Try never. Yeah, that's what that.
And so the question becomes, of, well, then how can I work in such a way that where there is this freedom? So,
Mhm.
one word that I've been using, the word fascination, but the other word associated with the numinosum is mysterious.
Mm,
Now, aren't you curious sometimes? I mean, there is this mystery in life, particularly when you're stuck. It's like, well, why am I stuck? Well, why can't I figure it out? What is this mysterious quality to it? And I love your attitude, Jan, because like the mystery of a horror film, for instance, I think is really healthy. But that words sometimes can be introduced within psychotherapy, and it's like,
mhm.
wow, that's kind of mysterious, isn't it? And you'd be surprised how that can help a person to move forward, because you will generally watch someone that all of a sudden they become very still. You might see a small nod, But as they're going into the mystery, well, what's a mystery? A mystery is something to be solved, isn't it?
Yeah, or something to be fascinated about,
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, you may never solve a mystery, but and it can be fascinating, the mysteries. It can be terrifying, the mysteries. It can be all kinds of things associated with
Mhm,
mysteries. I mean, my favorite mystery is, why do I love you so much? Like, what a mystery is this, is that I could love you this much.
mhm.
But it runs the gamut of all possible emotions. But also, when you think about like what interests you, isn't it the mysteries in your life?
Yeah, and when we are talking about solved and unresolved mysteries, I'm suddenly what comes to my mind is it's something totally different. But once they asked Quentin Tarantino what are his favorite movies and what movies he hates the most. So one of his favorite movies was the Matrix, the first episode, the first part, I would say.
Mhm.
And one of the films that he doesn't like the most are the additional two parts of the Matrix. And one of the arguments that he stated for to support his preference, he said that, I mean, the first movie was great, but in the second and third part they spent too much time trying to fill out the gaps and mysteries, and so everything suddenly starts to be, you know everything, so there's no mystery, nothing fascinating, nothing to think about, or something like that. So not all the mysteries are good to be resolved right away.
Absolutely. What a great story, of the fact that if you fill in too many gaps, you lose some of that mystery. But that's also somebody else filling in the gaps for you. It's one thing if you fill in the gaps,
Mhm.
but so in the Matrix series of others filling in the gaps,
Mhm.
and I'm sure that there's plenty of people that they just love having those gaps filled in.
Probably.
Yeah.
However, additional thing that came into my mind from hypnotic realities, there's a part in chapter 4 where Dr. Erickson talks with Dr. Rossi about the inner work that the clients that they are working with at the time are doing. And there's a part where Dr. Erickson just leaves the two people. It was probably there was a woman and a man, probably wife and husband, I don't really recall, and her initial was S and his initial was I think H. And so at a particular time in the session, Erickson. So in the room there was Dr. Erickson, Dr. Rossi, S and H, so four people. And suddenly, so Erickson is working with them, giving them some suggestions, going with them through some experiences, and then suddenly he just leaves them for 10 minutes and starts talking with Dr. Rossi about some manuscripts that they were actually working on. And then there's this part where they analyze that, and Dr. Rossi asks him why did he do it, and Erickson says it's sometimes good to just leave people in a state of a trance so that they can experience their own creativity in that state, and reintegrate what happened and experience the state itself and its creative possibilities. And also, he said, that deepens the whole experience. So isn't that actually in a way, like uh, talking about the same kind of thing, that people are, the burden of responsibilities in a way placed on them, and also they have that time to actually, they got some material from the outside, but then there's this time to reintegrate things and to actually uh, find our own way to fill up all the gaps and stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and it's in it. Ernie was so good to bring these cases forward and in this particular way, And it brings me to when I've done clinical demonstrations in front of an audience, and particularly these, well, now I do them just with myself, but when I did them with Ernie, and and there would be a lot of different consciousnesses going on at the same time. And so in those cases, I was feeding to Ernie because my ears were better. So I could feed to Ernie about what the client, a word or two, a phrase or two, that sort of thing that was then going to help Ernie to be able to go further. And then I would say often to the client that was sitting in the chair, I said, well, you continue as you are. I'm going to say a word or two to the audience. And then I would explain to the audience, what I was looking at, how this thing was going. So I was, with the mechanics really of how the therapy went, because it's a teaching experience at a conference. I want them to be able to not just observe, but to understand what was happening at the time. And then I'd glance over at the client. They're busy working totally on their own. And then I would be quiet. Ernie's, would then start it again. And it was a continually deepening experience for that client. And people find relief when you, as Ernie used to say, when you shut up. That everybody has like their pet peeves. And my pet peeve is too much talking within therapy. I like to have the silences. I'm very comfortable with silences within therapy. And that's what, in this case of Erickson and Ernie, where literally they were discussing a manuscript. So it's obviously a private conversation between the two of them, exemplified the same thing. How do you do that when it's just you in the room with the client is the mysterious question to ask.
Well, yeah, it's probably somewhere in between the words, somewhere in the silence. There's a secret to it.
That's what I think, is that you give an opportunity for silence. And within that opportunity, you'll see pretty quickly whether more words need to come out or whether you go with the silences. And the deeper a person is in trance, then it doesn't matter. You can keep talking because they're not even listening to you. But you could also just plain stop talking and see to see how that goes. It depends on your personality of that. I know some people, they really like to have therapists. They want to have a constant stream of words coming out. And those therapists that do that, they'll say right in the beginning, and you'll hear what you need to hear, and not, you don't need to hear everything. Sometimes my voice is going to fade and then come back, but inviting the ability to have, really the dissociation so they can go into themselves. It's quite an art. It's not, I wish there was more of a protocol on it, but it really is an art.
Yeah.
Do you find that fascinating?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's an art of communication, art of language, art of observation, art of being in a relationship. There's quite a lot of, dimensions involved into deep, good, solid hypnotic work.
Yeah.
Hypnotherapeutic work.
I'm going to return to, where's your numinosum?
Well, I mean, for now, I think there's a lot of things in the discussion that we are having that kind of connects together in a slightly new way. So I've got some of my own thinking processes, and
Mhm.
I'm in a process. So we're gonna find out. Some insights are coming, ideas on how we can actually, uh, um, uh, bring that more into our work together. We're
Mhm.
gonna find out. There are plenty of ideas. I mean, I'm thinking about all these in terms of hemispheric dominance, about our model of session of hypnotic therapy and stuff like that. So I'm like kind of trying to combine those things and developing ideas in my head. I'll share them with you later.
Oh, sure, but isn't that great? And that's the way the numinosum works, is you invite it, and then you see what
Mhm.
happens.
So the numinosum is also kind of in a part a, an ingredient or an experience of change within a therapy.
Oh, yes, because when you're looking for the new, when you're looking for the unexpected, like, you can fill in all kinds of words, but when you're looking for what is unusual rather than what is usual,
Mhm.
you grow. Especially if you have established a safe place so that you're free to fly, as I like to think of it.
Yeah, and that's actually very important. I think to myself many times when I work with people that are heavily traumatized, for example,
Mhm.
that's crucial, crucially important to have that safe spot
Mhm.
where they can start their journey. You know.
Yeah, the safe spot, and then also the curiosity,
Well,
that within any given
mhm,
trauma, to that curiosity, and breaking people out of the same old, where the mind is in a circular way, and you want it to kind of go more to a spiral, where
mhm,
there's going to be some wobbles and shifts with it. And that and I think, in my opinion, I know there's so much focus on trauma, trauma informed therapy, of
yeah,
being, like, really cognizant of this. And while I think that that's good, I also think there's an overemphasis on that. And even when you say the word trauma, it's like kind of heavy. It's sort
yeah.
of, uh, it's like it turns on a different kind of gene expression than when you're thinking about the numinous. And so when you bring the concept of, yes, this trauma happened, um, but what is fascinating about this trauma to you? What's mysterious about this trauma to you? And is there a way that you could come at this trauma sideways instead of straight on, like, or zigzag, or of this sort of thing? But when you focus on the growing edge, which is really what the numinosum is, that there's a shift away from the focus of the trauma onto something else, which opens up the door, more often than not, to face the trauma directly. And when you can face something directly, you have a better chance of getting over it sooner. So it's a very different way of working. I know sometimes as we're talking, and I know people in the audience are saying, you know, well, yeah, I agree. But we really are seeing a lot of things that they're different. They're paradigm shifts. And I'll really emphasize it, is that I really care about therapists. And many therapists, when they're working with somebody who's really traumatized, they kind of go into a trauma themselves. And
Yeah.
I want to help that. I want to be able to be there with heart and soul, but to not have the therapist go into that kind of pain for themselves.
pain is one thing, but what I'm thinking about many times, what I saw is that, for example, when someone is working with anxiety, uh, there is this the dynamic while a client works with anxiety, that at some point in the therapy there needs to be some kind of, you need to face the fear or the
Mhm.
anxiety to
Absolutely.
to desensitize it, or do whatever it takes to learn dealing with it. And that's not something that people like to do. They want to be cured, but they don't want the
Yeah.
cure. So many times people consciously or unconsciously try to convince the therapist that what they are actually afraid of is something worth being afraid of.
Mhm.
And I like the term that David Burns created, where he says that patients are trying to put you into a negative hypnotic trance, uh, and convince you, hypnotize you into their problems. And how many times I've heard that, uh, someone would say, uh, that I have a client who has a fear, like phobia of, for example, going into an elevator or something. And while we're talking about desensitization or something like that, they go, so you are telling me that they supposed to that they supposed that it's good for them to go into the elevator? And I go, well, probably yes, at some point. And then they go, and what if something horrible is going to happen down there? And I go, what can happen? I mean, and so many times people therapists are afraid
Yeah.
to put people through things that they are afraid of. So
Right. Well, but you bring up an excellent point, again, about therapist care, is that I don't want any therapists to be afraid. I want
mm,
therapists to be comfortable within the inside of themselves. And so, all of us throughout the history of having been a therapist have had a client come in that reminds you that you got some work to do with yourself. And so when there is this invitation of doing the work that you need to do for yourself, I think
mhm,
that that's really important. But what I see is that with the compassion that is coming forward within therapists, is they put their mind into the same mind as their client, which might be fearful, it might be anxious, and that's not necessary. You don't have to do that. I have taught many people how to become anxious, and they explain it to me this way. No, 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 doctor, you don't understand. I came to you because I don't want to be anxious. I said, we'll get there. I said, in the meantime, let me teach you how to be anxious. And it's
mhm,
like, I don't know, I've never had anybody that refused. It's like, okay, I want you to hold your
yeah.
breath. That's what I want you to just go hold your breath.
Me?
Yeah, just keep holding it.
Okay.
Yeah, keep holding it. Keep holding it as long as you can. Yogis can hold 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. You can hold it a long, long time. That's you can. Look at those eyes. Are you getting anxious yet? And when you choose to breathe, just make it kind of shallow. Shallow breath. Nothing that goes below here. That goes below the top of your chest, and then you can just see what happens. He's still going. I think that this is pretty amazing. What a talent we have here in Jan. I'm not supposed to make him laugh. Then he's going to have to breathe. But the whole idea is that physiologically there is only your body only has one way to make you anxious. There you go. So, are you anxious yet?
No, but I'm trying. Hyperventilating myself.
Yeah, that'll do it too. Uh-huh.
But that's actually pretty nice. I mean,
Yeah, it's actually doing something that's a little bit different, But so the only way that you can become anxious physically is through your
Mhm.
breath. It's holding your breath,
Yeah.
it's shallow breathing. And so when you bring attention to, okay, so that's how you do it, then what happens is when that individual is going into anxiety, they're realizing, oh yeah, it's in my breath. But you're a
Mm.
special case, but in the fact that you're doing this and not getting anxious. But it's also that if I can help you to be anxious, but there's no reason, like there's no mental thing going on, and yet
Yeah.
your body will go into anxiety. It's like, okay, so then my thinking needs to be rearranged, because the way that I'm thinking is bringing me into anxiety.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
and I think it's
Exactly.
fascinating.
And I think that actually protected me because, I've did that a lot with clients, so I'm familiar with the practice. And also, I am, because I feel like dizzy and there's a tingling on the back of my head and stuff, but I know that it's gonna appear. So I'm like more observing it and thinking to myself, yeah, another step. And so I actually attribute that to the breathing, not to some kind of, so I don't have the anxious thoughts, the
Mhm.
what if thoughts or stuff like that. So the attribution is different.
And it's amazing because this happens so quickly. And
Mhm.
so when you think about how quickly you can make yourself anxious, well, isn't the opposite of that true?
Yeah, probably. So
You
there
know,
are those symptoms in here, but I understand them different. And the one thing that comes out of this experience is that the perception of the symptoms and the way I understand them also probably makes one reaction more possible than the other.
yeah. And I mean, and quite frankly, it's mysterious. Like, it's mysterious. It's fascinating. And then when you think about it also, we originally you were talking about what's transcendent. And
Mhm.
so it's like, well, what's tremendous is that you feel different now than when we sat down. Excuse me. You feel different than,
Yeah.
it's not quite an hour, but you feel different now than when we started.
Mhm. True.
That your perspective is different, your experience is different. That's what transcendence is that when you can recognize, and you have a genius of having a really great inner observer, Jan. That's how you could do this physical exercise but not go um, into anxiety, because you were actually fascinated watching yourself doing this. And
Yeah.
but the um, being able to transition into what's next is the most glorious part about being a psychotherapist, and helping to lead clients into their own transformation, and then to be able to recognize that. I mean, and that's really stage 3 of the creative process. That's where the
Mhm.
numinosum is totally alive, is that there's like these new
It's being
possibilities.
expressed down there.
Yeah, and it's being expressed, and then you also have a shift in gene expression that happens during that time, and where there's something that's new.
And that's an insight of some sort, right?
And an,
That's
an
typical.
insight, a realization, a sensation, even,
Mm.
so it could just be a sensation of, yeah, it's not feeling as bad now. That, I mean, of course, who doesn't love these, transcendent stage 3s where, you realize, something that you never realized before, and it's really spectacular. That happens from time to time, but more often than not, it's like this sense of relief. And in part, that relief is having paid attention, having focused on, as directly as you can, on whatever it is that you needed to focus on, of staying with difficulty and
Mhm.
seeing what happens next. And then the body will put you into a natural rest phase. It'll put you into a natural relief that lasts anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes, and or 2 to 20 minutes or whatever, but you get this relief. Now, I've never had anyone emphasize this with me in any of the psychotherapies that I've participated in for myself,
Mhm.
but this sense of relief is so important. And so for the therapist who has been participating in the therapy and maybe working through being overly involved or working through one's own anxiety or that sort of thing, being able to key into that relief time, take it in, nourish it, let it permeate your entire chest, to feel your shoulders being relaxed, to feel your feet on the floor in a different way, to feel a sense of that relief is what Erickson would say. That's what you get after a job well done. And that's going to happen for you, every hour and a half or two throughout the day and
Mhm.
night. So, depending on how you work as a psychotherapist, most people work in the traditional sessions, 45 minutes to an hour. You're going to be on a different rhythm when you find that relief. It won't necessarily be within the client session when it's that length of time, but you can tune into that and deeply appreciate it. I work in double sessions.
Mhm.
uh, because that's what suits the way that I like to work. So I feel that sense of relief, that stage 3 in myself in each session. And when I experience that as a psychotherapist, I know that that session is coming to a conclusion.
Mhm. So in a way, you know where you are in within the session based on your own feelings.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
much is it your feelings? How much is it an observation of what happens to a client? And how much is it some kind of setting of coordinates that there
Well, I
are?
do believe there's a synergy on is
Mhm.
that even I'm experiencing with my client when they're in distress, there is a part of me that experiences that. That's the mirror neuron situation that happens. But also, I'm in the place that is holding the calm, that's holding the hope, and they're receiving that from me and my mirror neurons. And so when you crest the top of the mountain and now you're coming down for the rest, that it often happens simultaneously, but not always. Sometimes clients need to stay much longer in their stage 2, and more often than not, they don't recognize their stage 3s. That's part of
Mhm.
our job as therapists, is to point out of, "Wow, you are breathing so much better now. Do you notice you
Mm.
just took a deep breath?"
Yeah. Is that also one of the functions of testing clients in like some currents of therapy, like in CBT? Many times people get to fill out the scales at the beginning of the session, and then they can compare, or at the beginning and the end, or you know, in between sessions, stuff like that, to measure the progress. Is it also?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Well, and those can be really important, I mean, those symptom scaling. and I know that in CBT they use that a lot, and I think it's really wonderful. I have a tendency to use symptom scaling strategically. You know, if a person is in physical pain, for instance, I like them to symptom scale it. You know, because I think it's really interesting. And also, when a person is in physical pain, depending on the number that they give, if they give a number that's like 7 or 8, I'll encourage them to make it higher. And because I know it's going to lower, you know, after that.
And plus, I think that by doing that, you also teach them how to control it in a way. Because
Well,
if they can make it higher, then that means that they actually can have
right.
some
And
sort of control over it.
yeah, exactly. And that, I tell them, I said, as long as you can modulate it, you know, that you can change it. It can go up, it can go down. Only you emphasize the down part. You know, I only emphasize the up part. Often that's for 30 seconds, which I time. You know, can you do this for 1 minute? You know, so it's time limited. And then it's like, well, then where are you now? Oh gosh, you know, it wasn't 8, now it's a 7. Maybe it's a 6.5. It's like, okay, put that in back of your mind, you know. And then at the end of the session, so where are you now? Well, I'm at a, well, 1. They say, yeah, 1's good. They get down to anything that's less than where they started is good.
Yeah,
But you
that's
know,
what
but again,
progress.
it's like, you know, in talking about getting the feedback. The other thing that, you know, one can always ask for feedback with their clients. More often than not, I would say probably 99% of the time, I do not. But also, I've been a therapist for a lot of years, and so I don't need the feedback that I used to in the younger years. I like to leave people when they're still kind of in a trance, even. Obviously, these are not people that are getting in the car and driving, right? Because you want to bring people fully alert under those circumstances. But these days, so much stuff is done online. And it's been marvelous because when they're in that special state, that that I'll even say, would you like to continue in this special state? Um, and you know, if the answer is yes, then, you know, I literally say, you know, sign off, and, you know, until next time, and that sort of thing. So to be able to ride those waves into new consciousness, new realities, new experiences, new possibilities.
So it's all about experiencing something new within within your inner experience.
And to be surprised, to be fascinated. That, you
Appreciate
know,
that.
yeah, to appreciate yourself. Because the
Notice.
one thing, you don't want to bore yourself. You don't want to have the
No.
same response day
Yeah.
after day.
Viktor Frankl would even say that if you are bored too often, then that would lead to how was it called, neogenic neurosis or something like that. That would then lead to the feeling of lack of meaning and sense, and would create symptoms. So being bored is not something that we want to experience in life.
No, we want to be fascinated. You know, um, we want to, even in the depths of despair, we hope that we want to be able to create again.
Plus, I'm thinking, you know, even if we go without logotherapeutic stand, but with the creative four stage creative process only, excuse me, then I think that people are more into destabilizing their lives than going into homeostasis, because
Mhm.
the close up of the circle is the homeostasis. And
Mhm.
then what we are doing purposefully, we are actually, going out of this state to look for another kind of challenge or something to, that's how we create problems, because we are looking for something different, for something else, or, trying to deal with something that we are not uh, good with, or don't want to accept, or
Uh,
something.
there's,
In,
there's all kinds of varieties.
Mhm.
And so I think, today we've really been explaining the numinosum. I think everybody that's been listening understands that. And I hope that as you explore this, for instance, one of the nicest ways to explore this is when you wake up in the morning, before you open up your eyes, before you get out of bed, where you
Mhm.
tune into your growing edge. So it's before the to-do lists, it's before, any of that, where you tune into your pure self and see what's emerging.
Mhm.
And it is a marvelous respite of and Ernie used to say, that that's where you can tune into where is your growing edge. And obviously when you're tuning into that, you're tuning into what interests you, what interests you, what
Yeah.
you would like to take further on something. And of course, it can also be, you wake up and you have a dream and it becomes interesting to consider your dream and what consciousnesses want to arise as a result of that. But I'm suggesting that to make numinosum, this idea, a part of your daily life and to see where it takes you. And I'd love to hear about it. I'd love to hear, like, in the comments and things of where it's taking you. And also, today was like, like really, positive and things like that of, the questions that you have and how we can help you further to be the best therapist that you can be, and how we can be supportive.
Exactly. I don't have anything to add to that.
Well, it's always a pleasure, Jan. I always learn something new when I'm speaking with you, and I feel the richness of the vastness of your knowledge, of my knowledge, of our knowledges together, and how they intertwine. And it it tells me how much we as therapists can contribute and support each other.
Yeah, by co-creating
Mhm.
realities. And it's also, I mean, on my part it's the same. Just to add to it, that I learn not a lot from you. I learn tremendous things from you, so that would be more on my part. It's that experience, and it's always very developing, and I really like the thing that we are actually among people now, and that anyone who would like to can actually ask us a question, put it in the comments. They anyone can do it right now, or after, or when you are listening to it, and it's like, somewhere in time in the future,
Mhm.
you can always put it in there, and we're gonna try to answer that in further podcasts or further live events that we're holding. Yeah, so that's probably most of most of the things that I would like to share now. There are a few questions about how we can actually achieve change within hypnosis and hypnotherapy, but we did so much on the numinosum today that I think that we can leave those questions to
Okay.
another occasion. I think I can ask one question, but we will not answer it today, just to, kind of start the thinking process or something, or, just state it. There, a few people actually asked the question in a variety of forms, the question that actually comes to, is it possible to create within hypnosis, deep or shallow or whatever, some sort of hypnotic trance or state? Is it possible to achieve a total alteration of human personality? I mean, not development of the skills that you have or something like that, but the total change or total alteration. So that's the question that actually three people asked, three different people, and I think we can pause in here and try to answer that maybe next time we're gonna meet.
Yeah, I think that that we should do a podcast on that,
Yeah,
because it is an interesting question, and it's not a short answer.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the whole nother story, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because that actually would be a question of what is possible to achieve during hypnosis, but also what is healthy to achieve during hypnosis, and what is beneficial to achieve during hypnotherapy or psychotherapy in general.
Mm-hmm. I think so. So that we've got our next topic for our next podcast, Jan.
Okay, cool. So that would be sooner than the live the next live conversation that we're gonna have. Okay, so I'll just gonna say one more time. Whatever you want to ask us, you can ask us a question on the YouTube channel that we're having on both of our. You can send it either to me or to Dr. Kathryn Rossi to her email. Can they? They can, right?
Sure.
You can post that on either of our Facebook pages. You can go to the page of the Małopolski Institute, or you can go to kathrynrossi.phd at Facebook and the Facebook page, and ask your questions wherever you want. Whenever you're gonna do it, and they will come to us, and we sure gonna be answering them. I received some questions through the emails, so that's cool. Just saying.
All right. Well,
okay, so
soon.
Exactly. So thank you very much, all of the listeners who are with us today, and hope you enjoyed our meeting. Thank you, Dr. Kathryn Rossi, for your incredible time and incredible conversation. This was another episode of our Experiencing Consciousness podcast. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Jan. You're the best. Be well, be happy, celebrate life.